Hello and welcome to the Do You Like Films podcast with me, Mickey Seago. I'm trying a new name. And
Shaun.
Sugary Sean. Curtis again can't be asked to be here because he's too busy with his migraine.
I've heard he's dripping in tissues because he's
and he's got a poor head.
Oh.
Because he's been notching it up. Anyway, enough great comedy.
Yeah.
We're talking about video game movies today. Sean,
That's me.
do you think that video game films can be good? The reason why I ask that is because pretty much every video game film I've ever seen reviewed has been reviewed badly. Even Warcraft, which made a bit of money, was reviewed badly.
I think a video game movie can be good. It's just we don't have many examples of them being good. And I'm not sure whether that's to do with it's not faithful to the video game, or it's so different from the video game, or they just can't cram, you can play a video game for 15 hours, but yeah, you've got to squeeze all that into an hour and a half movie. But, there've been comic books and books that are so extensive that they've been condensed down into movies and they can work. So surely video games can?
Video games in recent years have become a lot more about the story, haven't they?
Yeah.
It's more of a journey that you go on when you play a video game. Whereas before with like Super Mario and things like that, it is a very basic premise of he's a I was about to say basic. He's an Italian plumber trying to save a princess from a giant dinosaur thing. So it's maybe a little bit more complicated than I thought. But that is pretty much A to B. And when you're jumping over things along the way. So to make a film on that, the Super Mario Brothers film, which I've never seen, but I've just seen awful reviews for.
Yeah, I've got that written down. When you said we were going to talk about video game movies, I've got Super Mario Bros. ... WTF question mark. Like, it's batshit crazy, and I've read and heard people talk about it, and apparently Bob Hoskins just didn't even know what Super Mario Brothers was.
Yeah, I saw that.
And like, for such a beloved video game franchise, like, I grew up on this sort of stuff, and I remember watching the movie back in the day and just being like, hey, that was pretty interesting because that was the character that I liked, not knowing when I was 5 years old how just rough it was, how weird a movie it was, and just how badly it was executed,
So do you think that a character like Super Mario can't really be put onto the screen because you don't actually have any material to work with other than the way he looks, other characters around him? There's no actual sort of famous Mario stories to work with. Whereas a film, are you familiar with the game The Last of Us?
I've heard of it.
So that's pretty much a film within a game. Do you think something like that is much easier to make because you basically got the script written already for you? You just have to change a little bits maybe here and there that would suit a film more.
But if it's already a film within a game or a game within a film, like what's the point really? If you've already got the story there, if you can play the game and experience the story as it is, then do you really need to make a movie about it?
I think it's a good question, but it's kind of an irrelevant one because it's about making money, isn't it? And if you're going to make money off it, books, you can say the same question. If, it's people that have read Lord of the Rings, why you've got it there, you've read it. Why do you need it in a film version? Why do you need to see things again? Or is it different in a video game because you've already physically seen these things? With the book, is it being brought to life?
Yeah, well, I suppose then you could say the same thing about comic books. You see the pictures, you read the words, you make it up in your head. So essentially it's a book, but it's also conjuring up images. There are images on the page that you can draw from as well, and you make up your own story. But comic book movies are the hottest thing on the planet right now, and they're great. So surely if you can grab a story from the pages of a comic book and make it great, maybe you can do the same thing with a video game. Or does it have to be a video game where there isn't much of a premise, but there are established characters? Like I've got written down here, Mortal Kombat, ... Awesome back in the day.
Yeah.
Haven't watched it in years, but it took a fighting game, which was essentially two guys fight, one of them rips the head off the other guy, and then you go on to the next round. There wasn't a story involved in that. But then the movie kind of made a story out of it, and it used the characters and used them almost sort of faithfully. So I think that's where video game and movie come together quite nicely. And if they did the same thing with Super Mario Brothers, they took the core concept of Mario and Luigi and then made that into a movie rather than just like, here's a couple of guys, they happen to be plumbers and they do some weird things, you know.
I think Mortal Kombat is a really interesting one because I think that works because it's so simple. I think in the Mortal Kombat games, like you said, it's just two people fight, there's a winner. They made it a story on a fighting tournament. And I think that's why it works so well. The second one becomes so much more complicated and it had a really lower budget, so it doesn't work anyway. But I think that one works so well. Whereas, do you remember Street Fighter?
Yeah.
Again, it's the same as Mortal Kombat in the games, as it's two people fighting. And then it became this massive, elaborate thing of guys trying to take over the world and stuff like that. So I think Mortal Kombat is kind of an exception. It works because they made a little story around it. But the general thing was it's a Mortal Kombat fighting tournament. So that's why I think Mortal Kombat works so well.
And maybe it's because almost the whole point and the popularity of Mortal Kombat was you fight, and then you get to rip this guy's head off, or you get to, you know, blast him into a fireball, or you get to, you know, chop his head off or pull his spinal cord out. And that was like a really enjoyable part of that video game. And then it kind of happened in the movie. It's like, is this a fight to the death kind of tournament? You know, it kind of upped the stakes a little bit. Whereas, like you say, Street Fighter was just a weird movie which happened to include characters like Eddie Honda and Chun-Li and all those.
And another question I'd put to you is something that has been quite successful, hasn't been reviewed greatly, but it's done all right because it's had so many sequels because of it, is Resident Evil. And I don't think Resident Evil's known for being very strict with the way it is to the game. I think it sort of has the odd bit like a monster from the Resident Evil games and things like that. Do you think that if you're gonna make a video game film, you should try and be loyal as you can? Or do you think you can just sort of borrow the characters and put them into a completely new story?
Well, it depends on the property. Like we were saying earlier, if it's Super Mario Brothers and you just take the general idea of it and then put it into a whole new universe, then why don't you just make a completely new movie and not really associate it with Super Mario Brothers? And I know it's because the name will draw in audiences, and that's the whole point of it. It's like rebooting and remaking a movie. You could just make your own film. You know, you didn't have to remake RoboCop in 2014. You could have just said, this is a new movie that happens to have a cop that's a robot. But they were like, well, no, it's going to draw in audiences because it's called RoboCop. Is it the same thing for a video game? Does it draw in audiences just because it's got the name value? Like you were saying with Resident Evil, they've done so many now that it's its own thing almost, isn't it? Like, I don't really associate it as being a video game movie because, well, they're up to like 5 or 6 now. Yeah. It's just continued on. People still watch it and they keep making them. So it must make a little bit of money and people must be interested enough to be made.
Are there any video game movies that you are very fond of that you think have worked well?
The only thing I can really think of is Mortal Kombat, the first one. But a lot of these movies I've watched and haven't rewatched, so I don't know if it stands the test of time or whether it's a good movie or if I'm just looking at it through nostalgia glasses. Like, I've not watched Super Mario Brothers since I watched it back then, but I've heard people talk about it. I've seen clips online and I've watched Everything Wrong With by CinemaSins, and you get the idea that this is not a good movie, but I can't really think of many that are good movies.
Did you watch Warcraft?
I didn't know because it didn't, like, the property didn't interest me, so I wasn't really enthused going in. Whereas I'm not a massive gamer either, so it would have to be something that I could relate to for me to go and watch it. But I heard that it wasn't that bad, really.
No, I really enjoyed Warcraft, and I think you're at a disadvantage with a film to that of a game, because with a game, you know, there's 40 hours playing time with some of these games. Warcraft, it's almost unlimited. You know, you've got worlds to explore. In a film, you've got 2 hours to try and create a world. And I mean, Warcraft's a bit of a different example to like Max Payne, because Max Payne is sort of, about a cop who's lost his family and things like that, whereas Warcraft is creating a new world. but it was a very good film in my opinion. I did enjoy it. Have you seen Tomb Raider, Max Payne, Hitman?
I think I watched Tomb Raider when it came out, but I don't really remember too much about it. I remember like thinking that Angelina Jolie was pretty good, like well cast as
Yeah, I remember
Lara
thinking she
Croft.
looked like almost identical to her.
And well, there's not really much you can do with the movie, and you can't really go wrong because it's a woman who's, I guess, an archaeologist who goes on some sort of adventure, you know. And there's peril and there's laughter and there's interestingness, but don't know, it didn't really appeal to me that much. I think the idea of the video game appealed more than the actual movie, you know. I think that may be a thing between video games and movies, whereas video games have that playability factor. You can play them over and over again. You can dip in and out of them, whereas a movie, you watch it, hour and a half later, it's finished, and you've had that experience. You're separate from the video game as well. That's probably what's magic about a video game is you're controlling that character on the screen. You're part of it, whereas a movie, you're not.
You're a viewer.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you looking forward to the Assassin's Creed film? And does it affect you that it is a video game film? Like, do you go in thinking because of things that have come before it, oh, it's not going to be very good, or do you look at it as it's its own film? You know, it's a new chance.
For me, I've only ever seen Assassin's Creed been played. I've never played it myself, so I don't really have that first-hand experience. I don't have that loyalty to it, if that makes sense. And I hadn't seen the trailer up until last week or so, and I thought, oh, I'll give it a shot. I'll watch the trailer, and if it wasn't called Assassin's Creed, and it was like, I don't know, futuristic movie with Michael Fassbender, then maybe I'd think, oh, that's quite a cool premise where his bloodline from years ago, he can go back into that body. Oh, that sounds really cool. But because it's called Assassin's Creed, does that take away from it? And it kind of did for me. I thought, oh, it's going to be based on a video game, so people are going to bitch about it, whatever happens, because it's either going to be too futuristic, or it's not going to be futuristic enough, or it's going to be too much in the past, or he's not going to do as much parkour as people want. And maybe that's the thing about video games is people play them and they have different experiences as they go through them. So everybody's looking for such a different thing within the movie that you can't please everybody.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. That like whenever a film of a book's made or a film of a comic book, but it definitely seems that with video games, they just get so hard, like scrutinized, and I think that maybe that is because video games is the sort of ultimate being in it experience. Maybe that's why, because maybe you have more of a personal, oh, it shouldn't be like this. This is what they should have focused on. This is, oh, they've cast that guy. This is how I see him. Because I've played as that person. Not literally as in like you're there voicing him and being that much of a loser. But, you know, you feel more like you were in that experience. Like I told you earlier, I'm playing this Alien game at the moment. And, you know, I'm genuinely jumping when I play it. I'm getting scared. And because I've played this game now, I feel more like if there's a next Alien film out, I feel like, oh, they should do this, they should do that, because I've played this game.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And kind of to add on to that point is I used to play Grand Theft Auto when it first came out on the PlayStation, where it's the top-down view, and I never really played the missions. I would just go around shooting people and stuff like that. And then if they made a Grand Theft Auto movie, would I just want some guy just going around killing people and then trying to flee from the cops? Or do I want a movie where he's going on a mission and he finds his mate and takes drugs from him to another guy, and then that guy gives him a mission. He has to then get in a car to drive to the helipad. Like, is that a more interesting movie? Probably. But would I, if Grand Theft Auto was attached to it, would I just want carnage and craziness?
That leads on to my next question, actually. Is there any games that you would love to see turned into films? I think Grand Theft Auto, now you've said it, would actually be a really interesting one, because you could make a story around it. There's loads of Grand Theft Auto games, and they do have an arc within these little missions that you're doing. Generally, you're the bottom guy that goes up to the top. And I think that you could make a good film on that with little Easter eggs towards the games. You know, famous things in the games like killing people and taking their money and things like that, where you do just have little nods. But is there any that you think particularly that would be a great game to turn into a film?
Tetris.
How would you do that? How would you go among?
I have no idea. I just want to pick the most obscure game that couldn't be turned into a video game.
They say that Battleship, it's not a video game, but there was a film based on the board game Battleship, wasn't there?
Yeah.
If you thought, how would you make a film on that?
But I guess the story's already built in, isn't it? It's battleships. It's people trying to sink other people's battleships. You have.
I think it has aliens in it, doesn't it?
Oh, does it? Oh, God.
Yeah. So I think that goes on to what we were talking about earlier. Like, you could put the characters, and do you have to sort of keep them in their video game world, or do you just write your own story and the characters just come with you?
I think you could go either way. I mean, 6 months ago they made an Angry Birds movie, which is based on a game where you flick birds at these weird pig things, and I guess they managed to make a story out of it. It wasn't exactly a movie that I wanted to see. I never caught it in the cinema.
I saw it, and I think that it wasn't that great a film, but you do have to appreciate, if you were to look at what Angry Birds is and then make a film out of that, like, you do appreciate, wow, I don't know how you've done that.
Takes a bit of ingenuity to come up with a story. I have a question for you. I don't know if you class this as a video game movie, but did you ever see Wreck-It Ralph?
Yes, loved it.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
I liked about half of it, and I thought it had the potential to be awesome because it was all about these video game villains, and they kind of all like hang out in this big sort of video game world, and you've got like Bowser there, and you've got Zangief from Street Fighter, and they're all hanging out talking about being bad guys and stuff like that. And I thought it was really interesting, and then it just turned into this weird like Candy Crush movie, and I was like, I don't get it anymore. It's no longer about this, and it's about something else. And did it start as a boys' movie and turn into a girls' movie? And that's a weird way that they wanted to spread it across both genders. And I
do love that opening bit when he's sort of talking in the group, and you see all those characters. That's a great little scene.
Yeah, and I thought they could do so much with it. But is it a case, we keep saying it again, we've had different views and different experiences with these video games that we're expecting so much different than the movie makers are taking it in. You know, you read a book and you read a book about a character going and doing this mission or having this objective, and then you see it in theaters and the character does exactly what it does in the book. You're like, okay, that's what I expected of it because that's what I read in the book. Whereas I played Sonic and I did all this crazy stuff, but now Sonic's just there not doing what Sonic does, or Mario or Bowser or Zangief. He's not fighting, he's not pile driving people into the ground, you know.
Is there anything else that you want to speak about on video game films?
No, mainly just about sort of how difficult it is to translate into a movie, and I think we've kind of covered it quite well.
I think we've done it bloody well, if you ask me. And I didn't want to just say this, but I feel like Curtis would have held us back.
Oh,
that's what the reviews are saying.
Is it?
Yeah.
Where are you reading these reviews?
Just on forums.
Yeah, which forums?
Film forums.
Yeah, which film forums?
And that's it this week from the boys, minus Curtis, the lazy shit. Thank you from me, Michael, and my buddy Shaun.
Hello, and goodbye.
Thank you. See you later.